Good morning, everybody.
So we're going live in 5 seconds. Here we go. Go live. And welcome. Here we go.
A little bit of an awkward pause.
Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Hi, I'm Gail Rubenstein, the founder and CEO of a company called Retail Resilient, social selling for the car industry. And we help auto dealers, auto agencies, and vendors in the auto industry sell more cars, service more cars, and make more money using our social selling strategy. That includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and anything else you can think of. So if you're looking to invest thousands and make millions, we're definitely the social selling company for you. Like I said, who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
If you run a service drive, you know these days first impressions matter. But when your advisors are tied up with inbound phone calls, they tend to neglect their other, more important duties. And did you know 75% of all service calls are frequently asked questions and routine requests? Still, the average dealer misses up to 30% of inbound calls, adding up to a ton of missed service opportunity and increased customer churn. 68% of callers actually go elsewhere if they can't get through, which means you could be losing $60,000 to $70,000 every month in service revenue simply from missing calls. So who will pick up? Introducing Brooke.
Hi there.
Your best service scheduling assistant. Brooke is the first intelligent digital voice assistant to answer, handle, and appoint all of your inbound service calls. Hiring Brooke means absolutely no call goes unanswered, boosting your customer satisfaction and reducing your overhead costs. And talking to Brooke is like talking to a friend, with human-level understanding and a friendly conversational voice. Her conversational intelligence is built on millions of actual service industry conversations, making her the easiest onboard you'll ever have. She can handle any volume of calls and follows your policies every step of the way, 24/7. That means even when the lights are off, Brooke is always on.
And I can do it without missing a beat.
You really do check all the boxes. Book with Brooke today. Visit Brooke.ai or call 866-942-1236. Finally, the perfect match.
Recently, we were concerned about our recon time and decided to look into reconditioning workflow software. After doing our research, I can confidently say we finally found the software that was right for us. We love that it packs robust data, control precision, clear communications, and performance accountability, all into my desktop or mobile, so I'm always in touch. Before this, we manually tracked our recon process. We just assumed we were doing okay. We were wrong. After someone in my 20 group told me he used this software to improve his recon time to sale to just 3 to 5 days, I just had to look into it. Their team of recon experts all have hands-on dealership experience. We all benefit from faster time to line, inventory turns, and competitive advantages. To learn more, visit rapidrecon.com.
Good morning. So go ahead, Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon, those of you who are joining us in afternoon, namely you, Mr. Letka. Thanks for joining us. And a quick little explanation for everybody. The reference of this you've seen us doing is just to Gail's Basset Hound flying down there. So Ian, recommend your books, please.
Well, a couple books. We've had Max on before. He's written a bunch of books. One is The Crazy Bleep, Car Dealers Do. This other one is Effective Car Dealer, Re-Engineering Retail by Doug Stevens, and Like I See It, Obstacles and Communities, Opportunities Shaping the Future of Retail Automotive. Go ahead with our disclaimer, Jeff.
And of course, so everybody knows that the views and opinions shared here today are those of our guests and not those of the AutoHub show officially, or Ian Nethercott or Jeff Polo. But you never know if we might agree or not.
Cool. So the topic today is, will the OEMs change retail? We did have Brian Benstock scheduled to speak today, but unfortunately he's meeting with the OEM. So stay tuned for our interview with him yesterday. We're going to be dropping it later today, but I'm sure we'll drop some nuggets during the show. So go ahead, Jeff.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining us. And the topic, as we said, is, will the OEMs change retail? And there's a tremendous amount of discussion around that pending from, or not pending, but starting with in Europe. Mercedes-Benz especially is changing their retail model dramatically, where they're going to almost a subscription based for their dealers. No longer, they may be franchised, but the customers will buy their cars from Mercedes and will take delivery at the dealer. And so we're going to get a lot of opinions today. So I'll introduce our guests, and thank you everybody for taking the time. First of all, we have Matthew Groden, who is the gentleman that knows everything at Google. And so deep knowledge guy. Matt, say hello and tell us more about yourself quickly.
See, I don't know, Jeff, I don't know if I know everything. I think
But that's on your business card.
it says I'm the answerer of automotive retail related questions.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know everything. Let's just set that straight. But yeah, so my name's Matthew. I do work at Google in Canada. And sometimes I just like to describe myself as the human interface to Google. So people, instead of typing that question into Google, they ask me. So that's how I.
There you
That's how
go.
I
So in the middle of the night, you wake up because somebody says, what car's better?
Indeed, and then I have to go answer that. I have to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
Best
for
news.
joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Michael Carmichael, and who's the president and CEO of Up Auto in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, for those of you that don't know, and a frequent poster about his experiences with a certain electric car. Michael, say hello, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me.
Oh, that was quick. Thank you.
Got nothing else. That's it.
And we have Scott Risley, who is the digital marketing manager from Mohawk Honda in Galway, New York. Scott, say hi. Tell us quickly about yourself.
Yeah, so our store is actually in Scotia, New York, but I run digital marketing for the Auto Group. We have a Honda store and a Chevy store. Honda store is a President's Award-winning dealer, consistently top 50 in the nation for new car sales. And happy that you guys invited me to be on today.
Thank you very much. We're happy to have you. And everybody, of course, we're just introducing in order of how they joined us this morning. Then we have Tim Jackson, who is the president and CEO of the Colorado Dealers Association in the Mile High City. Tim, please say hello, and thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Ian and Jeff, and everybody on the show, and the new introductees. It's good to talk to you. I represent new car dealers, truck dealers, RV, and motorcycle in the state of Colorado, both for advocacy, regulatory compliance, and communication. So, and on the car dealer side, all of them are involved with the association.
Great, thank you so much. And then we have Dakota Walker from VetX Used Vehicle Acquisition Service, officially on LinkedIn in Chico, California. But I have no idea what you do there because LinkedIn didn't tell me. Tell us a little bit about your position.
Well, I'm the director of sales and marketing over at VetX. 10 plus years in sales, degree in business with an emphasis on marketing. Morning, guys.
Thanks for joining us. Last but not least is Chris Paff, the CEO of the company that bears his name. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good morning to all, and happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge those that have joined us live. It's in the world of podcasts and recordings and YouTube. It's great to see some sunny faces that we used to see all the time when it was just Zoom. And I do want to acknowledge our platinum sponsor, Gail Rubenstein from Retail Resilient. the providers of all wonderful things for us and great big supporter. And of course, the dog. We'll just get started right into this very quickly. You know, we're 15 minutes in and we haven't asked a single question, but we are going to go to the questions now. Ian.
Yeah, recent comments and actions from a few OEMs in other markets are pointing towards a desire to go to a direct sales platform. With dealers' franchise models changing, how likely do you think this is going to happen? So let's start with Chris Pfaff.
I think it's very likely going to happen. We're hearing a lot of discussion. I heard another one from another manufacturer last week, and yeah, I mean it seems to be coming. They're treading very carefully at how they present it to us. And I actually have given it a lot of thought. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think it may be a good thing for everyone involved if it's handled properly by the manufacturers. And we know, at the end of the day, it's not about the dealer or the manufacturer. It's about the customer, the consumer, and what they want. And that's what's going to drive the future.
Okay, appreciate that. Michael, what do you think?
I think I have to agree with Chris that I think it's in motion. I think, and I've done a fair amount of legwork trying to better understand it, because I do agree that there is a move afoot. There's some interesting news out of Australia where Mercedes is getting some blowback as to perhaps they didn't disclose everything in the most forthright way in the what do they call the agency model move that's happening right now. And so I think as I've been doing my dive on it to better understand it, I can't see any data or have any kind of case study results, or I haven't been able to find any that do show it's better for the dealer. I do agree that a lot of this has to be driven by customer experience. However, the day that somebody can decode a customer invoice repair order, I think we have to cross that bridge first before we look at upending the entire model. And that's where I've got my concerns is I think conceivably it can be better for the manufacturer. I don't know if it's better for the consumer, but I think time will tell, and the horse is out of the barn, so we just got to track it and see where this goes.
Cool. Tim, what do you think?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. And this is obviously a very important topic to all franchise dealers in the US and around the world. First off, we've known for many years that manufacturers will toy with the idea of wanting to sell direct or wanting to take over the retail process. Every time that that's happened historically, they've failed miserably. The most recent real-time example was when Ford Motor Company bought out all of the dealerships in Salt Lake City, Utah, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma City. They literally bought all of their dealers out and put in what were called, and this was timeline-wise, by the way, was in the late mid 1990s, so around 1994, 95, 96. So they bought out all the dealers. Of course, this was in the time that Jack Nasser was CEO, and they had to then have somebody to run those stores. And because somebody had to be feet on the ground to take care of the customers, they actually hired back a lot of the dealers and general managers that they had bought out. That was interesting. But 2 years roughly later, Ford ended up, after losing not just millions, but hundreds of millions of dollars, sold those dealerships back to franchisees. That's just one example, but let's go back briefly. And I'm a believer that it's impossible to know where you're going unless you know where you've been and how we got to where we are. And that franchise retail model dates all the way back to 1898 with none other than Ransom Eli Olds, the founder of Oldsmobile. Henry Ford followed through on it in 1908 when he started building the Model Ts in Dearborn. And General Motors came together on September 16, 1908, and they immediately started franchising dealers. So some of those dealerships that were franchised as early as 1908 are still in business today in their fourth or fifth generation. So it is a long-standing tradition. And why does it work? Why did Henry Ford, who didn't have to do this, Ransom Eli Olds, who didn't have to do this, and General Motors and others want to do it? It was they needed retail spaces all over the country. They needed to have their cars where their customers were without having the investment of all those retail operations. And to quantify that, it's now statistically between a $22 and $32 million investment per retail site. So somebody that's starting out in the automotive business, it's nearly impossible to build out a retail network. I know Tesla's been mentioned on this program earlier. And Tesla, after 18 years in business and 11 years of making cars, is now profitable. But Tesla's a little bit of an unusual animal, and I wouldn't try to replicate that with future manufacturers.
Thanks very much. Scott, what do you think?
I think it's tough. I mean, I see it coming with some manufacturers, but I also think that at the end of the day, people want to buy cars from people, and they want to have a choice of where they want to buy the car. They want to go where they're going to have a good experience, where they have that relationship. And that's not necessarily with the manufacturer. I mean, you see it with service all the time. You know, when you'll get a customer, they'll come in and they come to the dealership because the dealer is the go between them and the manufacturer, and the dealer advocates for the customer, you know, for example, with warranty exceptions and that kind of thing. And to put everything right to the manufacturer, I think in my opinion, you'll see the first dealers that, or the first manufacturers that do it, I think they're going to lose market share, because I don't think that customers want to do business direct with the OEM. They have these relationships. I mean, we have salespeople that have been here for 25 years. You know, they have a huge book of business. They want to do business with people that they trust. They don't want to do business with somebody that's basically an order taker at the manufacturer's location, where you're going in and you take all of the personal experience out of it and you're just checking boxes. They want, you know, it's relationship-based selling for a reason. And people buy from who they like, and that's where you see people go. You know, there's a reason that small dealers stay small, and the dealers that provide a good experience get larger.
Interesting. Matthew, what does the data tell us?
What does the data tell us? I can't predict the future, so I like to say, like, so what does the future bring? I don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. I think people think we have a crystal ball at the office. We have, you know, free lunch, but there's no crystal ball. How likely is this going to happen? How likely is it that this will happen? I think it's pretty likely. What the data has said for many years is that, you know, there is one group of people who are quite comfortable with the dealership experience as it is, about half. But then there's another half that are like materially frustrated by that experience. So I think everything everyone has said is true. I think what Scott said is true. There's this, you know, established group of people who are like, I go back to this dealership because I know XYZ person. I know this person. I trust them. I'm going to buy from them again. And then there's an entire other swath of people who don't care about that, who are looking for the purchase experience that makes it easy for them to get a vehicle in the way that they want to buy it. We talked last time I was on the show about, you know, the adoption of the notion of omni-channel retail, right? So it's this, can we move from a place of this is the only model, right, that as we have it today, to a model where if I want to buy that car online, and maybe today in kind of this interim space that might be done through a tool set that actually goes straight to the dealer. I think more and more those tools are going to be OEM sponsored, that the OEM is going to have a tool that allows me to buy a vehicle or initiate the purchase online. And that's how they effectively, you know, annex the customer at that point. They effectively then own that customer. And so I don't know if it's all or nothing. I don't know if the agency model fully transplants the franchise model, or if it becomes more like we see in some other industries, like in telco, where there are the combination of everything. You have, you know, OEM stores like the Apple Store and the Samsung Store. You have franchise business that are like telco dealers that basically behave like they are Rogers, Telus, and Bell, or AT&T and folk in the US and Europe, and then they have corporate stores that are owned. So it's, you know, we look to other industries for examples of how this might pan out, and I think there's probably an entirely reasonable corollary in the telco space where automotive could take a page. Automotive could learn from. It's not all or nothing. It's probably one of these other variations. Also, in our more recent research, we know that more than half, 53%, and this number has gone up and down, way up in the middle at the early days of the pandemic and then kind of leveled out, but about 53% of Canadians want to be able to buy their vehicle online, right? They want to be able to do that. So if this is kind of the split, and I suspect if I don't have the exact data, but if I could do a Venn diagram of the people frustrated at dealership and the people who want to buy online, I'm suspecting there's a huge overlap there. There's a huge overlap between people who've had a negative previous experience and people are like, isn't there a different way to do this? Why can't I just buy it online the way I buy my groceries, the way I buy my books, and the way I pay for my Netflix subscription?
Well, it's interesting. We were talking, we did an interview yesterday with Brian Benstock because he's meeting with the OEM right now, so he couldn't be on the show. So that episode will drop later today. And we were talking a lot about customer experience with Apple and other retailers. But the thing that was really interesting is we were talking about some controversy Amazon got into with these stores where you just walk out. Whereas, like, not only did they have data about what people bought, but what they might have bought. And we were talking a little bit about Netflix going, well, he was over at his daughter's house and her Netflix selections were a little different than his when he tried to watch her Netflix. So it's kind of interesting. But Dakota,
there's a very famous bad example of a drugstore in the U.S. Of how personalization can go astray and how they started recommending like prenatal vitamins to a teenager, and the father was very upset about this, and it turned out the company knew that this teenager was most likely pregnant before the father was told. So yeah, there are bad examples, but it's like, data needs to be protected, it needs to be managed, and so it's that could happen to anyone.
Well, he basically said, I'm a runner and I'm happy with them selling me running gear, but yeah, suggesting I buy women's undergarments was a little bit of a problem for him. So I thought that was funny. Dakota, go ahead. You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be incredibly likely we're going to see a shift in the norm here when it comes to how dealerships are dealing with the new car customers, which is, in my opinion, why acquisition through other avenues such as private party and auction or KBB ICO are becoming so popular. I mean, if we're being realistic, 5 to 10 years from now, we might not even recognize how we're interacting with customers right now. I've seen a lot of dealerships personally. They're moving into weird places. Even Web3 and the metaverse to try and create a new user interface for these customers because they know that the shift is coming. They're trying to get ahead of the curve and try to be the first people to the party. They were late to the party with Web 1. They didn't want that to happen again. And they were late to the party with Web 2. Now they're finally starting to understand that the Web 3 might be an early investment type deal. I just think that whoever finds the best solution right off the bat is going to be the winner in the OEM space.
Well, stay tuned for our Metaverse show later this month. If you're curious about the Metaverse, it should be very interesting. We're actually, one of our guests will be the first dealer to deliver a car in the Metaverse. I have no idea how that works, but we're certainly interested.
The dealer in Naples?
Yeah, go ahead.
Brian Kramer.
Brian Kramer will be a guest, absolutely. Confirmed.
First delivery in the Metaverse.
Yeah, if you're curious. But did you have any thoughts, Gil?
Oh, about the OEM or the Metaverse?
Well, the OEM or the Metaverse experience, I guess. I mean, you're more versed on that than we are, for sure.
I guess in regards to this topic, I agree with everyone's points that they brought up. And I think there are a lot of consumers that like that people buy from people. And then there's people like my dad that are grumpy and he's like, I don't want to talk to anyone at a car dealership. I just want to go online and have my new car delivered to me. So, you get the whole spectrum of how consumers want to experience or have a car buying experience. But I do think in regards to the new car department, it would be amazing to have a retail channel similar to like the Turo app. So when I want to rent a car, I go on Turo. I don't go to Enterprise and Hertz and like all those places. I go to Turo and I find someone with a cool used car that, I think is nice. I chat with them on my phone. They come to the airport, they pick me up, and I have my rental car for the week. And it's the easiest thing in the world. And if I could buy a new car that way, I probably would. So it would be really interesting if the OEMs put in some or built an application where the customer could actually purchase the vehicle, subscribe to the vehicle, drive the new vehicle, and then turn the vehicle in at the dealership. It would be amazing, actually. So I don't know. Every customer has a different way that they like to do business.
Maybe even buy the used car from a Turo owner, maybe. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, thank you. One topic came up yesterday was the fact that making it easier for customers to virtually test drive their cars. And we talk more about the metaverse and everything. How long is it till we just sit in our home and put on goggles and headphones and pretend we're driving the car without ever leaving our house? Anyway, that isn't the question. I'm going to jump ahead because we send out a questions to everybody, because we're leading toward this. With this likely change now, which everybody's coming up with, truly, what can dealers, what can staff do to protect their, not just their financial investment, but in the case of staff, their lives, if we're going to this circumstance where salespeople may not be necessary? You'll have delivery specialists if they pick up their car. Your 250,000 square foot showroom is one big waiting area. What can we do to protect our investment? And actually, I'm going to go to Chris because it's been about 5 minutes since he had a chance to partake. Chris?
Sorry, I mean, it really comes down to what the consumer wants to do. They're all gonna want to interact in a different way. So, I mean, I guess it's business basics as to how you protect your investments and stuff. I know that with one new franchise where we have to contemplate a relocation of real estate. I'm finding this with all manufacturers. They're very, very flexible now on how you do it. You can do standalone sales only in great retail areas and have service offsite at a different area. So again, this is all in flux, and this is all going to continue to adjust as we move forward.
Interesting. Got to be a scary thing, especially somebody like yourself with multiple rooftops and a lot of staff to take care of.
Absolutely, it is, and I mean, we converted about 2.5 years ago to one price, one touch, no F&I managers, and no negotiation, and it's worked out extremely well. It's been easier in this new environment, but we were doing it pre-COVID, and it really, consumers, most of them, not all of them, but most of them really like to do business this way. Reduced our costs of selling cars. And the customers don't like being passed around. Most of them, they want to deal with one person start to finish. They want to transact much faster. So these are the things you have to try to do if you want to continue to have success as you move forward.
You find too that your staff is a little less stressed and happier doing that?
Absolutely, they're happier as well doing it. In fact, a lot of them have said to me they don't want to go back to the old way of auto retail.
Terrific. That's a very good point. I appreciate that. Michael, you made a comment here about talking with a web provider that of the 200 dealerships he sees, none have had any traction for retail on their online environment. Tell us more and on the question.
Yeah, and so I think first off, to parse out the Canadian versus the U.S. markets are dramatically different. I think data is very dangerous in that, tell me what you want the narrative to be, and I'll find the data to give it to you. So, I'm a big believer, and I was on another national platform, and I was asked a question about online retail, and the most misused word, in my opinion, the phrase digital retailing in our industry. And look, I believe you have to be digitally relevant. You have to have adequate SEO. You have to be on Google and social, and communicate to the customers in the way in which they need to. And to parse out my situation is I sold my store in the city, and I'm a fourth generation car dealer. And I sold my store to get out into smaller markets. And so I've gone outside the city, and we're in the process of building up a platform of small market stores. And it's how I anticipate the business would have been 35 years ago. It's dramatically different than the urban markets. And so urban Canadian markets are different than rural Canadian are different than metro Canadian, and then Canada as a whole, I believe, is different than the U.S. However, on this platform, I was asked a question about online retail and how much have you spent on digital retailing and an online platform to sell cars online. And I said zero, and I won't spend it until I start hearing from customers who are actually buying cars and not people just asked what they think about it. Is this important to you? So we talk to our customers, and in our markets, they want to come into the stores and talk to people. We support their hockey teams, we support the soccer teams, we support the food bank. We do a lot of things in these markets where we really work to make an impact in the community. We've doubled the income of all the people at all the stores I've acquired in the last few years, and plan to do that going forward because we're growing these businesses. And so I had this individual reach out to me, and he said, well, good for you for saying that, because he said of the 200 plus stores, it's actually more than that they have a line of sight on in Canada. He said none of them are selling cars online in any material sense. And he said, sure, they're onesie twosies, or if they're doing their lease returns through their online platform or lease renewals. But I think you touched on it. I think to say Tesla sells all the, look at what Tesla does. Well, you don't have a choice. The 2 Teslas I bought in the last 2 years, I bought in the showroom with a salesman who knew nothing about the cars, and he took my orders and he put them through the system. And I've had a horrible customer experience on every touch point since, more or less. Love the technology, hate the experience. But I just think it's we have to be careful to say, what are we trying to solve here? And I think too many tech providers and platforms are trying to provide solutions for problems that don't exist.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. You brought up a good point about retail, about rural versus urban, because I noticed that too. I was spent a lot my whole career in urban, and now I have a little used car lot way out in the suburbs, and boy, is it different. It's like 30 years ago.
It's
really
awesome.
Is. Yeah, it's different. That's for darn sure. And what do you mean you couldn't sponsor the local hockey team when you were in the city? You can't sponsor the Maple Leafs?
Well, it's. I went to the first my first season in our first market when I bought a Subaru store and a Nissan store in Stratford, Ontario, and I went to the Business Improvement Awards and Business Excellence Awards. My apologies. And this is like the Oscars for the community. It was unbelievable. And when you start meeting the folks who are so vested in the community, the authenticity and the impact that they're making in their businesses with their teams, I was blown away. I had teams in the city when we'd sponsor, you get the emails or the letters, but you tell you what, I'll give you $500. I know we need more than that. Like, that's the response I would get at my store in Toronto. And I'm like, well, forget it then. We can't give every team $2,000, so we're out. We give teams $250, $100, and it makes a real impact. Your money goes further in the smaller markets. Look, there's fewer zeros at the end of every calculation when you buy a store, sell a store, or your total net profit annually. But at scale, it's a very different business.
Tim, you represent, obviously, your organization, a large number of dealers. What do you think dealers and staff are going to be able to do to protect their investments should the manufacturers, pardon the term, force this way of doing business on us?
Was that directed to me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. First off, I mentioned earlier how the franchise model started out, but as it has developed, all 50 states have developed franchise laws to govern the relationship between the manufacturer and the dealer, and those are intended. And I think Chris was right ultimately when he said it's ultimately got to be about the customer. So those laws are all intended to protect the customer. Let me take one run at this that has not been covered, and that is to separate the sales from the service. There's been a lot of talk about the sales experience and going online and buying something on an app like Turo. A new car is a lot bigger purchase than a rental on Turo, but no doubt there are people that want to buy something over an app or online. The service experience is different, and that is that when somebody has a problem with their car, they want to be able to get that car to the service center or repair center, whatever you want to call it, in the dealership model. Get it into the dealership or get it into the repair center as soon as possible, get it fixed as soon as possible, get it back on the road as soon as possible. And even if you say, even if one can say the Tesla sales experience has been overall decent, and Michael has some points that it's not perfect. Um, I think we can all say, if you watch social media, that it's certainly not, the service model is certainly not perfect. The biggest problem the Tesla model has right now is satisfying the service demands of the Tesla customers. And that is either getting them in, getting them scheduled, getting the parts and the repairs made, or if it's in a collision, getting the parts to repair the car. So I think really this will play out over time to benefit the consumer, because the consumer will rule no matter how it plays out. But I think we really ought to separate the sales processes from the service processes, because I think they are distinct. And then on the just on the question, I think, and I'll speak just for Colorado, manufacturers can sell direct in Colorado if they don't have franchise dealers in the state for their brand. So a Tesla can sell direct, a Rivian can sell direct, for example, or anybody that doesn't have a franchise model. So the problem with factories selling direct when there is a franchise dealer is that they would be competing with their own dealer. And we all know that's not going to be a level playing field. That would be nearly impossible and wouldn't be ultimately good for dealers or consumers.
Cool.
Great. No, very, very good point. Scott, I can't see on my multiple thing there. Did you? Oh, there you are. You're back. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, my computer died even though it was plugged into the wall, so I had to troubleshoot some technical difficulties on the fly.
So tell me, what's your thought? Because you've got a couple of stores. So what can dealerships do to protect themselves with this potential and who knows, maybe likely change? And the staff, what can they do to protect themselves from this?
I mean, I think a lot of it goes into what Michael was saying about being involved with your community and, all the different stuff that we do around our community. I mean, for example, this morning, I'm part of our volunteer committee at the dealership, and we just scheduled two cleanups where we're going when the dealership is closed on a Sunday to two autism schools around here to help them do a spring cleanup on their playgrounds. And, between both stores, we'll spend, pretty much the full day there. But as you get more involved with your community and you have those people fighting for you as well, that manufacturer that's coming to you saying, hey, we're going towards this model, you have a lot more eggs in your basket to say, well, why are you going to pull away from something that's working? And kind of like Tim was saying as well with service, I mean, a good part of dealership business right now is customers that come in for service and then you end up trading them out of their vehicle. Think about it from the sales point of view. Customer comes into service, they want to trade in their car and say they want to while they're here for service, and you got to tell them, sorry, we can't do that here. You got to go up the road. How's that going to go for retention for the manufacturer?
Yeah, exactly.
Very good point. Thank you. Dakota.
Yeah, I think that's where the OEMs would like it to head, but of course in the States we've got a lot of franchising laws. They would love to find a loophole to go D2C, but I think that the way I understand it, the legislature on that is pretty ironclad. I don't think that the dealerships have much to worry about, especially in this market where they're buying and selling a lot of used cars and auction cars. I think what's going to be more likely is a new solution coming to dealerships in the States, whatever that may be or whatever that looks like. It's hard to say right now. It's a little early, I think, but I think we're going to see some new innovation in that area when they do decide to take that step forward.
Great, good point. Thank you. Actually, just from the comments, everybody here, that decision seems like it's been made, and it's just how they're going to push it in there. And so the gentleman from All Things Metaverse, Matthew, tell me what your position and how dealers and staff can protect themselves when this comes.
I think there's a lot of things in here, right? So the like I said before, I don't think it's all one or all the other. And so even when I'm talking about online sales, Michael, I appreciate And I'm not surprised if you're talking to the vendors that put that stuff out into the world, that maybe they don't work perfectly well right now, that there's definitely room for improvement. I often use the phrase, we're partying like it's 1999, and that's a lot like the early days of e-commerce. And no one, in 1999, I worked at Chapters, and no one expected to be able or wanted to be able to buy books online. And now you would be hard pressed to not buy a book online. Like now it's the dominant way that people buy books. And that took, 20, 25 years to become reality, but it did happen. And so I think the same way that the franchise to agency transition to a degree is probably inevitable, the extending some amount of sales into a digital space also inevitable. It will never be all of them, right? And I use the example of, if I buy a TV today, if I want to buy a TV, I do all of my research online. I find the TV I want. I go to Best Buy or Walmart to see it, the same way I would do a test drive. And then I decide the way I want to have it delivered. Do I want to take it home that day and, effectively drive it off the lot of Best Buy, or do I want to have it delivered to my house? And so that's really just a function of convenience. But the the real way dealers can protect themselves now, I think, is really to adapt and optimize and diversify, right? So when you see a lot of this happening, but it's like you have this giant piece of real estate. Are there other ways it can be used? Right? And I've heard a story of a dealer out in Alberta that now rents his showroom as a yoga studio. Yes.
Ah,
Well,
that's funny. I gave someone that idea and I didn't think they would do it.
yeah. So I think that
That's
this
awesome.
is, so whether it's, yoga studio or event space, they are beautiful facilities that have lots of opportunity outside of what they're doing today. You look at downtown Auto Group, and this is a lot of real estate in Toronto where real estate is scarce. It's like, can we build up? Right? How what does up look like? Can I turn this into a dealership plus condominium, dealership plus mini mall, dealership plus? So I think there's a lot of outside the box thinking, but I also think it leans heavily on this notion that everyone has already echoed, which is, how do I improve the customer experience? And Chris made a fabulous point around like simplifying the contacts for the consumer so that they're only dealing with one person is probably one of the simplest, biggest changes we could make for the consumer, because that simplifies the buying experience for them. And I do think that I believe there's a huge opportunity for F&I, and that we need to, and this is completely, I don't have any data that says this is an IMHO in my humble opinion, that if we need to pull the veil off of F&I and stop hiding it at the end of the transaction and actually expose it as a thing that people might want to buy, because you don't buy an iPhone without Apple Care, right? Like and you know about Apple Care, like what Apple Care is as a thing, and I don't even own an iPhone. But so if we could like take that same sense, the same kind of brand building about Apple Care, and then apply that to finance and insurance things that we might sell to people and brand them and make people aware of them, they'd probably be more likely to take them, right? Especially as we move more into this world of cell phone on wheels, right? As soon as these become electric vehicles and have screens, we all know screens break. We know screens break. And so I want to insure that thing. I want to buy the protection for that, because I know it's a complex piece of electronics that breaks, and that's a customer experience I'm very familiar with when it comes to my mobile phone or my television.
Well, I certainly hope your phone's a Pixel. But
Pixel 6 Pro right here. Pixel 6 Pro.
There you go.
It
We'll move on
sounds
to the
like
next question.
oh, sorry, Jeff.
Hey.
It sounds like a hybrid business. From everyone talking, it sounds like a hybrid business model with your entrepreneurial, outside of the box thinking to generate revenue will work no matter what.
Well, there's no question, and I was going to comment that it's going to become a case where people will go into the showroom, and then after a quick chat, whoever they deal with is going to sit in front of a console, and they're going to spec out the car, press order, and go from there, versus pick one sitting on the lot, and especially in the circumstance we have now.
Well, if you look at it, Jeff, and not to bring up high-end brands, but when you look at what Maserati and Ferrari have been doing for years and others, I mean, really, it's more about an experiential purchase. And to Matthew's point, why not in that process talk about all the technology in the car, or even talk about it before they come in and go like, you know, cars have 20 computers today or 40 or whatever it is in microchips. That's obviously top of mind. You know, why wouldn't you want to do that? And it's funny because I actually bought a new phone recently and I noticed that Apple made a shift in their extended warranty. They're now saying, well, we used to only offer 2 years, but we'll offer a month-to-month plan now. And I hear the next move for them is a monthly subscription model where you just get your new phone whenever you want. So I think that there's definitely some traction there, and it's certainly interesting as we customize experiences for customers, but more importantly, look for new ways to avoid the box term in automotive retail. But go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I do have to mention, James, thanks for the comment, James Hamilton. It's just saying Ford's been setting up dealers for 2 years. Interesting. I like that term, setting up. They've launched model landing pages for nearly every new model over the last 2 years that the franchise has mirrored on their sites. So these landing pages will enable full e-commerce, which sounds like dum-dum-dum.
Tim had a question. Go ahead, Tim, or a comment.
Yeah, just a quick comment because with regard to there was talk about what would we use the showroom for, maybe yoga. Well, if you look at the direct sellers and the case in point, and that's been referred to here mostly as Tesla. Tesla's retail model has really changed. There was a while that Elon Musk says we don't need to have any retail outlets. We'll do it all online. Everybody remember that? That didn't even last 3 months, and they ended up really not ending the retail model that they had already started to develop. But now, at least, and I'll speak for Colorado, but I think this is nationwide and maybe worldwide. The Tesla dealership looks just exactly like any other franchise dealer. It's got a showroom, it's got a service department, it's got an F&I department, it's got a controller's office, it's got a sales office, there's a used car lot, there's a new car lot, and in some cases there's a collision center. So they've really, it's surprising to say this, but Tesla has mirrored the franchise dealer model on facilities more than anybody, or I'll speak for myself, more than I ever expected. And now, as Rivian and some others new startups start out, they are mirroring Tesla. So it's really evolving to the franchise dealer model on facilities. So then the next question is, how is that facility operated? And I think that I'd refer back to separate sales and service. I think the service is far better in the franchise model.
Well, when you look at Tesla, at least in our local market, what used to be a Nissan franchise right next to one of my clients, which happens on a Honda franchise, they've leased his building.
Right.
So the old Nissan franchise is now a Tesla franchise, for example, or a Tesla location. And that's also true in another local market where it used to be a Mitsubishi franchise and now it's a Tesla franchise, for lack of a better term. But Chris, did you have any thoughts on this?
I do. I mean, you know, Tesla's had a monopoly for years, so that's why the retail model worked really easily, because it was a monopoly. And as you know, we've heard there's a lot of loyalty with those cars, despite all the problems that they had. You know that the all the electric cars that are coming out, there's a big issue for the manufacturers. They can't make them profitable. They're having problem getting to the pricing levels they need to, and the cost of making these cars, they expected to go down with volume. They're actually going up due to raw materials. So that's why, and I think why you heard Ford now going to separate their business and having a separate franchise agreement, I guess, for electric cars. And I think it's pushing the German manufacturers the same way. So you know, there's a lot of this stuff going on, and it's like I think we've all said here. There's going to be a lot of different ways. It's going to take time for this to evolve. You know, I said to Michael, what Michael said about rural versus urban markets, it's a very valid point, very different. And on our, you know, we have a lot of luxury and exotic, and the higher up you go in that food chain, customers want personalization, they want discussion. And you know, a Camry is more of a commodity than a McLaren 720. And there's a vast difference in those two models as well.
Cool.
I have a comment. I think, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but from being in the car business for 20 years, and I now have about 300 car dealers across the US that we work with, I think the minute Facebook can figure out how to put the banking system into the retail channel, or a manufacturer puts the banking system into that e-commerce solution, it's like game over. That is literally my thought about this, because once that banking system is synced up and you can buy a car from beginning to end with the banking system included and there's no people involved, that's the one link that's been missing in the car business for years and years and years.
But
Gail, I agree. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But can
Some
I
people
just
might not agree with me, but that is just personally my thought on this whole thing.
thoughts?
Just a quick comment on that. I think logically that makes a lot of sense, and I'm working on some technology with a friend who has done a big dive in auto fraud. And the good news is, the battle on drugs is getting better, and that business is going down. But they're moving to cars because it's easy and safe. And so when you look at the growth in auto fraud in the last 36 to 48 months, it's skyrocketing. And especially as things go more digital, I think fewer people involved. The fraud business is going to get really, really good, and it's growing at an alarming rate. And I think, and speaking to our Canadian system, the way our banking is set up, that will never be the way in Canada. So I can't speak to the U.S. But just with the checks and balances and the security and the AML and the KYC kind of protocols to prevent fraud, I think that is going to be the hurdle on getting everything online. And look, I think it should be more difficult to buy a car and make the second largest purchase of someone's life than ordering a pizza, because they are not equivalent, and you can't equate it to an iPhone or an Amazon purchase.
Interesting.
A little harder to return your car to the dealer because after 3 months, because heck, you don't like the way things are integrating.
Well, if it's like anything trying to call Google, you're not going to talk to somebody at that point, right?
Ouch, I'm right here, Michael. I was going to say that I think there are some startups that are trying to crack this nut, and if they get close, or if they do, then they're highly likely candidates to be bought by some of the large banks in Canada and US. But so as soon as it's not likely going to be, from a Facebook or a Google, it's probably more likely going to be, an upstart, or it's actually, there was a company called Upstart that's trying to solve this problem in particular, and using machine learning to find a way to issue credit in real time based on a different set of scoring, not FICO. And so if somebody cracks that nut and simplifies that, that's one part of the battle. The other part of the battle is also licensing, and which again, so if you can expedite and digitize the licensing, the plating exercise, then that's another piece of the equation. I go back again to 1999 when we started selling books online. It was actually 98, but I started in 99. The credit card companies didn't have a set of codes for online transactions. All of our purchases actually looked like travel. We had to put, because we needed a mechanism so that we could do a pre-auth and then settle later. And the only mechanism that the credit card companies and the acquiring banks had was basically booking a hotel. So we used the hotel booking mechanism so that we could, take an authorization, hold it for a period of time, and then settle the transaction when the book actually shipped. And it took years for the industry to rally around, okay, looks like e-commerce isn't going away. Maybe we need to set up some new codes and some new thresholds here that are different than what we have in place today. And so I think the same thing is going to happen either through a very innovative OEM that gets very excited about doing this in their finance department, or by a startup that gets there first and then is acquired.
James on this call said Ford has this coming. He put it in the comments, actually.
Yeah, so I think there's people are working on it, right? Like, so OEMs are trying to solve this problem to make that easier. And so it wouldn't surprise me if the credit divisions of every major OEM have someone scratching their head about this particular problem.
It would be amazing. I'm all for it.
Scott, any thoughts?
Not really. I mean, I think it's something that, like everybody else is saying, is coming, but it's a matter of when, and it's a matter of who. I mean, like some of these guys were talking about digital retailing. I mean, it's, the amount of people that use digital retailing end to end is, last I looked was under 5%. If those people aren't using that, and that's, that's with the highest performing tools out there, you've got manufacturers forcing digital retail tools on dealers, that, for lack of better terms, don't work and are a poor experience, what's that say for customer confidence to go to a model where they're going to buy their car online from the manufacturer? If they can't get digital retail right, then how are they going to roll out this other platform, anytime within the next decade and actually make it work?
Fair enough. Jeff, in sensitiveness to time, we got to go to final comments. Go ahead.
Well, everybody, thank you very much. I'm sorry with such a big panel we didn't get more input, but wow, did we get some great stuff. I really appreciate all the comments. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We know how busy you are. Same thing yourself, Michael, and as is everybody. And terrific show, great knowledge I picked up. Wow, I thought I couldn't learn much. Of course I could. But thank you all for joining us. And if anybody has a final comment from their end, please say it now.
Nobody's talking about today, how are the manufacturers going to be able to afford to buy all these franchises back? The real estate that goes with it when they're tens of millions of dollars. Also, how is Ford, General Motors, Nissan going to be able to sit with the local legislators in a little town when they need to do renovations on a building, that all the local owners know how to deal with the people in the town? I don't see it working. I really don't. And I'm old fashioned and I still buy things in stores. I don't like ordering from Amazon because it's destroyed retail. Just my feeling.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? No other thoughts, really?
Wow, that's great.
That's great. All right, well, we're going to end the show. Have a great week. Thanks for coming on, and stay tuned for the Benstock interview later today. Thanks a lot.
And of course, this one will be posted soon because you guys are way more important than him anyway.
Exactly.
Thank you all.